At my birthday party, my dad said loudly, "Too bad your kid doesn't belong in this bloodline." My brother's wife snorted. But my husband took a deep breath and said one line that made my mother gasp, and my father slammed the table. It was my birthday and my father decided that was the perfect day to humiliate my daughter. We were all seated at the table pretending, for the 100th time, that we were a normal family. My mother had arranged this whole dinner to make herself look good on Facebook. The dining room was over-decorated with fake flowers and gold napkin rings, like we were royalty instead of a broken family with too many secrets and not enough decency. Mia sat beside me, her little legs dangling off the chair, hair done in 2 careful braids. She was the only person smiling. And maybe that's what made it worse, because my father watched her with this look I've seen before. A look that said, "You don't belong here." And then he said it, loud enough that no one could pretend they didn't hear. "Too bad your kid doesn't belong in this bloodline." I froze. Dan dropped his fork. My sister Lydia, who has never liked Mia and never tried to hide it, let out this snort like it was a joke, like maybe Dad had just said something edgy but true. My mom didn't say a word. Just reached for her wine glass, like maybe if she drank fast enough she could pretend she wasn't part of this disaster. My brain kept repeating it, "Your kid," like Mia wasn't sitting right there. Like she wasn't the same little girl who handmade everyone Christmas cards, who helped my mom bake cookies every winter, who cried when her fish died and asked if Grandpa could build a tiny coffin. Dan sat very still. He looked at Mia. She hadn't reacted, thank God, but she was busy playing with her fork, not realizing what had just happened. Then he looked at my dad. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't stand up. He just said one sentence. "If she's not family, then neither are you, and your little retirement fund can forget my name." My mom gasped so loud it was almost theatrical. My dad slammed his hand on the table and stood up, knocking over a wine glass. Red soaked into the white tablecloth like blood. And I swear to God no one moved to clean it up. Dad started shouting about respect and how Dan had no right to threaten him in his own home. But Dan didn't shout back. He just looked at me waiting. That was the part that broke me, I think. The silence from my mother. The silence from Lydia. And Mia, who still hadn't looked up, because she didn't know she'd just been told out loud that she was nothing to these people. I stood up. Told Dan to grab our things. Told Mia we were going home. My mom said, "You're seriously going to leave over this?" I didn't answer her. I didn't have to. Because that was the moment I decided that if this was the cost of keeping them in my life, it was too high. We didn't say a word in the car. Mia fell asleep before we hit the freeway, clutching the little stuffed bear she'd brought to dinner. The same one my dad had once called junk from the past. Because it was from Dan's ex's house. Like anything that came before me was a stain. Dan was gripping the wheel harder than usual. His knuckles were white. I could tell he wanted to say something, but he waited until we got home and got Mia into bed. Then he sat down on the edge of the couch and said, "I'm sorry I brought you back into that house." I didn't respond right away because I wasn't sure which part he was apologizing for. For the dinner. For the years of their snide comments. For the holidays where Mia was deliberately left out of family games. For the time my mother gave gifts to every grandchild except her and claimed she didn't realize. Or maybe he was apologizing for something neither of us could fix. Who Mia was born to. But that didn't matter to me. That never mattered. The next day my mom called. She started off pretending like nothing happened. Asked if I'd left my scarf behind. Asked how the weather was. I waited. And finally she said it. "Your father might have gone too far, but he didn't mean it like that. You know how he is." I told her I knew exactly how he was. And I asked her if she thought I didn't notice how she never once stood up for my daughter. Not once. Not when Mia was left out of family photos. Not when Lydia gave her used crayons last Christmas while her kids got new iPads. Not when Dad made that disgusting comment about raising someone else's leftovers. My mom got quiet. Then she said, "Juliana, it's complicated. Blood is..." I cut her off. "Blood is thicker? Sure. But loyalty's thicker than both. And I'm loyal to my kid. All the way." Then I hung up. Later that week Lydia texted me. Said she heard there'd been drama. That maybe I should just let it go because Dad was stressed lately. Because Mom didn't need the extra pressure. Because family was family. I didn't answer her either. Because if family treats your child like trash, they're not family. They're just strangers who know your birthday. A week passed. Then silence from my parents. Not even a half-hearted check-in from my mom. No texts from Lydia. Nothing. And for once the quiet felt good. Dan was lighter. Mia was happier too, even if she didn't know why. No more tense Sunday dinners. No more forced smiles. No more pretending. Then my mom called again. I let it ring the first time. Second time I answered. I shouldn't have. He sounded different. Tight. Rushed. She asked how I was, then immediately started talking about their roof. Something about a leak. How they had to call someone out and it was going to cost more than expected. Then she said it. We might need a little help. Just a loan. Just temporary. I didn't say anything. He kept going. Your dad's pension doesn't cover this stuff anymore. You know how things are. That's when I finally spoke. I said, why don't you call Lydia? Silence. Then she said, Lydia's not in a position to help right now. She just bought a new car. You know how responsible you always were, Juliana. You've always been the smart one. That line stopped me cold. Because for 35 years she never once called me the smart one. Never once told me I was anything other than the difficult child. It was always Lydia who was perfect. Lydia with the better grades. The better job. The better marriage. Even after Brian cheated on her and she forgave him in less than a week. And now, suddenly I was the smart one? I asked her straight up. Since when do you think I'm the smart one? She hesitated. Then she said something I'll never forget. I never loved you the way I loved your sister. But you're the only one who can help now. I swear I stood there for a full 10 seconds trying to figure out if I'd heard her right. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the truth finally slipped out. And she didn't even try to take it back. I said if you loved her more then call her for money. I'm sure she can sell her perfect car. Then I hung up. Dan was standing in the doorway. He didn't say a word. Just came over and hugged me. That night I sat with Mia while she fell asleep. And I made a promise in my head. No one who makes her feel small will ever have access to her again. Not even the people who share her last name. About 3 days after I hung up on my mom, Dan got a message on LinkedIn of all places. It was from Brian. Lydia's husband. The same guy who once told Dan he was brave for marrying someone with emotional baggage. He'd sent a casual message about grabbing lunch sometime, said he had some things to discuss. Dan showed me his phone, shrugged and said, what do you think this is? I already knew. They weren't done. They couldn't control me anymore, so now they were going to try him. I told Dan to go. Not because I wanted him to smooth things over, but because I wanted to see exactly how far they were willing to take it. He met Brian at a steakhouse near downtown. Neutral ground. Lydia was already there when he arrived. Apparently it was her idea. Dan told me everything later that night. Lydia started by saying she was worried about me. That she thought the conflict was putting stress on my marriage. That I might be confused or overreacting. Then she said something that almost made Dan laugh right in her face. She said, you know Juliana. She spirals sometimes. Dan said he didn't answer that. He just waited. And then Brian cut in. He said the family was just struggling with boundaries, and that maybe if Dan cooled things down with my parents I might come around. Maybe even let things go. Let things go. Like being told our daughter wasn't family. Like my mom admitting she never loved me the way she loved Lydia. Dan told them something I never thought I'd hear come out of his mouth. He said if you think I'd ever trade my daughter's dignity for dinner invites and fake smiles, you don't know me. And you clearly don't know Juliana either. Then he stood up, dropped enough cash to cover his meal and theirs and walked out without saying goodbye. When he told me later I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just felt done. Like I could finally breathe without all their judgment in the air. The next morning my mom texted me. Just 3 words. You've changed, Juliana. He was right. I had. And for once I wasn't sorry about it. It was a Friday. I remember because Mia had worn her rainbow sneakers to school. The ones she swore made her run faster. And we stopped at the corner bakery like we always did. She picked a chocolate chip cookie, 2 napkins, one for her and one for Mom obviously. I was in a good mood. That fragile kind you know won't last but you let yourself enjoy anyway. And then I saw his car. My father had never once driven to our house without being invited. Not after we got married. Not after Mia moved in. Not even for holidays. Those always had to be on their turf, under their rules. He was standing by the front steps, arms folded like this was his home and we were the guests. I told Mia to go inside and start her drawing. She didn't ask questions. She never did when adults got weird. When the door closed he didn't waste time. He said this has gone on long enough. I just stood there. No invitation. No smile. I wasn't giving him any ground. He started in like he'd rehearsed it. That this rift was tearing the family apart. That I was turning into someone they didn't recognize. That Dan had gotten into my head. That I used to be loyal. And then came the real reason he showed up. He said, "Look, we both know that girl isn't ours. It's not too late to fix things. Not too late to come back home. But you need to stop pretending she's your daughter." He said it like it was a reasonable compromise. Like the child who called me mom every night could just be erased if I blinked hard enough. I didn't yell. I didn't tell him off. I just looked at him and said, "Mia's more mine than you ever were my father." That made him pause. Just for a second. He said, "You think that man and his money will last? What happens when he leaves you? What happens when you're broke and alone? Don't expect us to open the door." I nodded. Then I said, "You already closed it. I'm just making it permanent." He scoffed. Said I'd regret this. Said blood doesn't just disappear. Said no. But some stains don't wash out either. Then I turned and walked inside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't even lock it right away. I just watched him get back in his car and drive off like a man who lost control of something he thought he owned. Dan didn't ask what happened when he got home. He saw me setting the table for dinner, Mia humming in the living room, and he just wrapped his arms around me from behind. I said, "He came here today." He asked, "Should I be worried?" I said no. He made things easier. We ate spaghetti that night. Mia said it was the best she ever had. Maybe it was. Because for the first time in years, everything tasted real. A month passed. No contact. No fake apologies. No flowers sent to smooth things over. It was almost too quiet. But I knew better. My family doesn't do silence unless they're planning something. Or waiting for someone to crawl back. That someone wasn't going to be me. Dan was thriving. He looked lighter. Happier. We finally started using the spare room as a creative space for Mia. Filled it with paints, pillows, and a cheap keyboard we found at a garage sale. She called it her idea room. She started writing stories about dragons and forests and brave girls who saved themselves. I didn't miss the symbolism. Then 2 days before Thanksgiving it happened. We got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside it was just a folded sheet of lined paper. My mother's handwriting. "You've made your point. But family isn't something you can erase. One day you'll understand that you're not always right. And when that day comes we'll be here. Until then, enjoy your new life." No apology. No ownership. Just a passive warning wrapped in smug pity. I sat there staring at the paper. Not angry. Not hurt. Just disappointed. I had held on to this tiny, almost pathetic hope that maybe, something in them would shift. But it hadn't. They hadn't changed. They'd just gone quiet until they thought I'd missed the noise. Dan walked in and saw the letter. He didn't ask what it said. He just took it from my hands and tossed it in the fireplace without reading it. And that, weirdly, was the moment I felt free. We didn't go to any family Thanksgiving that year. We cooked at home. Just the three of us. I made a cranberry sauce from scratch that turned out too bitter, and Dan burned the rolls. Mia said it was the best Thanksgiving ever. At one point while we were watching movies in our pajamas, she looked up at me and asked, "Are Grandma and Grandpa ever going to come here?" I didn't lie. I told her, "No, sweetie. They won't." She thought about it for a moment, then nodded and said, "Okay. Can I still call Grandma Judy in Wisconsin Grandma? Dan's mother?" "Of course." I said, "Absolutely. She's your grandma. He loves you." Mia smiled and went back to her popcorn. That was it. That was the whole conversation. No sadness. No confusion. Just a child who knows who loves her, and who doesn't. That winter my mom tried calling again. Twice. Then Lydia emailed me asking if I was still angry. Like this had all been some emotional tantrum I was too stubborn to move on from. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't angry. I was done. I had spent my whole life bending to people who used love as a tool. As leverage. As a prize you win by staying quiet. But once I became a mother to Mia, everything shifted. I saw how easy it is to destroy a child's self-worth with just a look, a phrase, a shrug. I wasn't going to let anyone do that to her. Not even the people who claimed to love me most. Dan asked me once if I regretted cutting them off. I told him the truth. I regret that they made it easy. They had every chance. They could have accepted her. They could have accepted us. They could have just stayed quiet that night at dinner and spared us all this damage. But they didn't. And now we're done rebuilding. They stood at the edge of the bridge and watched it crumble. And I finally stopped trying to fix it. Some bridges aren't meant to be crossed again. Some are warnings. Proof that you survived the fire and built something better from the ashes.